Welcome to Photos and Travel, a show that introduces you to fascinating places around the world. Please welcome our host and tour guide, Jonathan Van Bilsen.
One of the most interesting cities in the U.S. is New Orleans, or Nolans as the locals call it. A city of culture, great food, and lots to do, there's never a dull moment. From its Cajun food to the fun-filled Mardi Gras parade, a trip to New Orleans will leave you with fantastic memories. Today we're going to explore this great city, as well as visit a few plantations and learn about life in the Deep South many years ago. We'll begin our adventure right after these messages.
Thinking of indoor or outdoor signs? At PP Print, we can help with so much to offer. Just ask. We've got you covered. PP Print, where experience pays off.
Pet Value has a fleet of services to help you and your pet live your very best lives. Visit Pet Value Port Perry for all of your pet's needs. Pet Value, your pet, your store.
New Orleans is located on the Gulf of Mexico, in the Mississippi Delta. Part of the city is below sea level, making it somewhat precarious when hurricanes and major storms hit. This constant concern does not seem to worry the people who live there, as they tend to live life to the fullest. The French influence is everywhere, in the food, in the language, and the customs. Settled in 1718, New Orleans was originally known as the Crescent City, as it was built upon an elevated bank of the Mississippi River, approximately 150 kilometers or 95 miles above its mouth. New Orleans, with a population of 400,000, is a bustling city with a huge tourist trade. It is world-renowned for its distinct music, Creole cuisine, unique dialects, and its annual celebration and festivals, most notably Mardi Gras. The historic heart of the city is the French Quarter, known for its French and Spanish Creole architecture and vibrant nightlife along Bourbon Street. The city has been described as the most unique in the United States, owing in large part to its cross-cultural and multilingual heritage. Additionally, New Orleans has increasingly been known as Hollywood South because of its prominent role in the film industry and pop culture. New Orleans is a magnet for artists such as painters, sculptors, weavers, and ceramics. You can shop their works on Julia Street in the Warehouse District or Royal Street in the French Quarter. Art markets can be found all throughout New Orleans, from the fence surrounding Jackson Square to the co-op markets along Decatur Street. Sculptures and various forms of art are found throughout the entire city. New Orleans is a sports town, and a stadium known as the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, seen here, is home to the New Orleans Saints and has been since 1975. The complex holds up to 78,000 people. New Orleans is home to theater companies big and small, all offering an array of choices all year long. Opera has a robust presence, offering traditional shows and modern twists. And the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra, based in New Orleans and performing throughout the South, carries the torch for live orchestral music in a city long enamored with the musical arts. When it comes to houses, there are no formulas or rules. Colors, shapes, and sizes vary from door to door and are largely based on the styles preferred by the residents. Most of the homes date back many years, with some being built in the late 1700s. We'll explore different styles when we tour the French Quarter. The French Quarter is the city's historic heart, famous for its vibrant nightlife and colorful buildings with cast-iron balconies. Crowd-pleasing Bourbon Street features jazz clubs, Cajun eateries, and reverberating bars serving potent cocktails. Quieter streets lead to the French market, with gourmet food and local crafts where shoppers can find everything from souvenirs to groceries to housewares. Since 1791, the historic French market has remained an enduring symbol of pride and progress for the people of New Orleans. In over 200 years of existence, the market has been built, destroyed, and rebuilt many times over. But what remains unchanged is the market's central spirit of commerce, community, and culture that is irresistible to visitors from near and far. New Orleans prides itself on various distinctive housing styles. The oldest are the Creole cottages, which date back from 1790 to 1850. They're single-story homes with steeply pitched roofs and front porches that almost touch the street. They're a distinct blend of Caribbean and French-Canadian design. American townhouses date back to the 1820s and are found in the Central Business District and Lower Garden District, which we'll explore a little later on. These narrow brick or stucco three-story structures feature asymmetric windows and iron balconies on the second or third floors. Another style of buildings, quite common in the French Quarter, are the Creole townhouses, which date back to the late 1700s. Creole townhouses often have shops below and homes above, brick or stucco exteriors, and arched windows. Built after the Great Fires of 1788 and 1794, these 2 to 4 story structures have a strong Spanish influence in the details. Raised center hall cottages are found in the Garden District, Uptown, and elsewhere, and date back to the early 1800s. These homes are urban versions of French colonial plantations. They feature porches that stretch all the way across the front with columns. Greek Revival and Italianate center hall cottages are most common in New Orleans, but Queen Anne and Victoria style also exist. Found all over New Orleans, shotgun houses are long and narrow single-story homes with a wood exterior and date back to the 1850s. Many feature charming Victorian embellishments beneath the large front eave. Some have a camelback, which is a second story set at the rear of the house. The term shotgun originates from the idea that when standing in front of the house, you can shoot a bullet clear through every room. Whatever the style of housing may be, you can be assured of lots of color and flair, including this, Jean Lafitte's blacksmith shop, the oldest house in New Orleans dating back to 1722. Music plays a vital role in the way of life in New Orleans. Jazz is of course the #1 style, and many musicians such as Bo Diddley, Louis Armstrong, and Trombone Shorty all got their start here. Style is left up to the individuals. In fact, there are over 5,000 registered musicians in New Orleans, ranging from old to young. One of the reasons so many tourists flock to New Orleans is the food. Whether you enjoy gumbo, jambalaya, or one of the famous beignets from Café de Monde seen here, there is no shortage of eateries. People think nothing of lining up for these famous French donuts. Here we see Commander's Place restaurant, frequented by President Obama. And this is the cafe from a streetcar named Desire at the front of the Royal Sonesta Hotel. If breakfast is your thing, you can enjoy grits most anywhere, followed by sweet potato pecan waffles, pain perdu, or couscous, a traditional Cajun breakfast dish. or you can simply walk around enjoying some street food while you admire the art. Jackson Square is a New Orleans landmark with the steeples of St. Louis Cathedral visible from almost anywhere. The statue of Andrew Jackson boldly stands in the front courtyard and is a remembrance of the 1815 Battle of New Orleans in commemorating the victorious General Jackson. During the first half of the 19th century, this former military plaza was renamed Jackson Square. Today it is filled with tourists and musicians. The Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, was built in 1850. It is the oldest cathedral in continuous use throughout the United States. And it's dedicated to King Louis IX of France, who was also known as St. Louis. When everyone thinks of New Orleans, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, Mardi Gras. This fun-filled carnival celebration leads up to the last day of Lent on the Catholic calendar. It is a time for partying before 40 days of fasting begins. People throw each other strands of beads or other trinkets, including coconuts, based on 150-year traditions. On March 2nd in 1699, French-Canadian explorer Jean-Baptiste de Bienville arrived at a plot of ground 100 kilometers or 60 miles directly south of New Orleans. He named it Pointe de Mardi Gras, and his men realized immediately it was the eve of the festive holiday. In 1703, the tiny settlement celebrated Louisiana's first Mardi Gras. By the 1730s, Mardi Gras was celebrated openly in New Orleans, but not with the parades we know today. In the early 1740s, the governor established elegant society balls, which became the model for the New Orleans Mardi Gras balls of today. The earliest reference to carnival appears in 1781. People go all out when it comes to decorating their homes by putting giant masks, streamers, and beads on balconies and porches. The festivities run all night as well as all day, and a special provision has been made to allow people to conceal their faces by wearing masks during Mardi Gras. It's the only time of year they're allowed to do so. A very interesting and worthwhile excursion is to Mardi Gras World, where all the magic is made. Since 1947, artists and craftsmen have designed and built the oldest and biggest parade floats and attractions for each Mardi Gras season, with over 500 floats built and decorated every year. When I first arrived, I was given a very detailed tour, including an overview of the history of Mardi Gras in New Orleans. From there, I visited the float den, where artists worked year-round to build spectacular floats and props. Unless you're standing beside each parade, you'll never get this close to the floats. And this is certainly the only place to see how these amazing pieces come to life every year. The word Mardi Gras is a direct French translation for Fat Tuesday. In the Catholic religion, the 40 days leading up to Easter are celebrated by fasting. This is representative of the 40 days Christ spent alone in the desert. Consequently, the day before Ash Wednesday, which is the official start of Lent, has always been spent feasting and partying. This global tradition has grown from one day into several weeks, depending on where in the world you are. New Orleans has taken this custom to the next level. And if you have an opportunity to visit during Mardi Gras, it is well worth the time. People from Acadia, what is now New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island, Canada's maritime provinces, were forced to leave by the British because they refused to take an oath of allegiance to the Protestant British king. They made their way down the U.S. coast, settling in southern Louisiana, where they were known as Acadians. But the people of the area had difficulty with the name and simply referred to them as Cajuns. The word stuck and has become a symbol for culture unique to that area. We'll be back with more on New Orleans right after these messages.
Hello, I'm Terry Voss from Voss Unit Crochet. It's been a year since the pandemic started. I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of our customers for their understanding, their loyalty, and their friendliness. I will admit it's been a trying time, but we have come this far only because of you, our valued friends.
The city has several nicknames, the most common being the Big Easy and NOLA, the latter meaning New Orleans, Louisiana. In the 1960s, New Orleans gossip columnist Betty Gilloud allegedly coined the Big Easy when comparing it to New York City. People in the Big Apple were perpetually running around, while a laid-back life in New Orleans reigned, hence the name the Big Easy. We spoke about houses in New Orleans earlier in this episode, but nowhere are there dwellings on a grander scale than in the Garden District. This beautiful neighborhood of New Orleans was originally developed between 1832 and 1900 and is considered one of the best preserved collections of historic mansions in the southern United States. This entire area once consisted of a number of plantations, which were sold off to wealthy Americans who did not want to live in the French Quarter with the Creoles. In the late 19th century, some of these large lots were subdivided, which produced a pattern for much of the neighborhood, where any given block has a couple of early 19th century mansions surrounded by gingerbread decorated late Victorian period houses. Thus, the Garden District is now known for its architecture more than it is for its gardens. It has been rumored that houses in New Orleans pay tax based on the size of the width of the house, and consequently people build narrow and long houses. This, however, is not the case and never has been. There was never a property tax on street frontage in New Orleans. In the French tradition, homes were constructed without halls, 1 room wide and 3 to 5 rooms deep, and can be found as either singles or doubles. A trip to New Orleans is not complete without a visit to the cemeteries. Burial plots are shallow in New Orleans because the water table is very high. Dig a few feet down and the grave becomes soggy, filling with water. So New Orleans graves were kept above ground, following the Spanish custom of using vaults. Often the remains are wrapped in a shroud and laid in a family tomb for burial. Because of the hot subtropical climate, the tomb effectively becomes an oven, and the high heat causes the remains to decompose rapidly in a process that has been compared to a slow cremation. Within about a year, only bones are left, and if another member of the family is in need of a burial spot, the previous remains are rearranged in a lower chamber in the tomb. The law states remains have to be entombed for at least 1 year. It is not uncommon for 2 remains to share a vault if someone in the family dies within that year. There are 45 cemeteries in New Orleans, of which 31 are considered historic and 5 are officially listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Many of the vaults are quite unique, and tours with lengthy descriptions are available. One of the key reasons New Orleans exists is the mighty Mississippi River Delta, which lies 100 kilometers or 65 miles south of the city. Mark Twain said that the Mississippi River was a wonderful book, with a new story to tell each and every day. The best way to see what Mark Twain was talking about is to take a paddle boat tour along the hard-working river and travel back to the days when steam-driven river paddle wheelers were the main source of both transportation and commerce. Most boat tours offer music and meals as well as cocktails and narration. Mississippi, a Chippewa Native American word that means large river, is the life force that has shaped New Orleans' history forever. The Mississippi River runs through or along 10 states, starting in Minnesota. It is the largest drainage basin in America and drains about 60% of the country's rivers. The main feeds come from the Missouri, the Arkansas, and the Ohio rivers, making this the longest river in North America, with a total length of over 6,000 kilometers or 4,000 miles. The Mississippi is the fourth longest river in the world, surpassed by the Nile, the Amazon, and the Yangtze, the latter being only 30 kilometers longer. Passing the levees gives you an example of just how low this area is and how easily flooding can occur. The Mississippi River Delta was created from thousands of years of sand, clay, and organic material being deposited by the Mississippi River into the northern parts of the Gulf of Mexico. The delta is home to massive amounts of wildlife. Over the last 3 centuries, the delta has continuously collapsed due to human alterations of the river system. In the 18th century, the river was the primary western boundary of the young United States. And since the country's expansion westward, the Mississippi River has been widely considered a convenient dividing line between the Midwestern, Eastern, and Southern states and the western part of the country. A trip to the southern part of Louisiana would not be complete if we did not stop at a few plantations. There are well over 100 plantations left in Louisiana, and many of them are open to the public. A plantation is a large-scale estate, generally centered around a plantation house. It specializes in cash crops such as cotton, coffee, tea, and dozens of others. Sadly, plantations have become linked with slavery, which was practiced in the area until it was abolished in Louisiana in 1864. The first plantation we stop at is the Whitney Plantation, which is now a museum devoted to slavery in the southern United States. The plantation was started in 1752 by German immigrants, and their descendants owned it until 1867. Live oak trees line laneways everywhere and derive their name from the fact that they are evergreen. Our next stop is the Laura Plantation, owned by Guillaume de Parc for his sugar farming complex. At its largest size, it was approximately 5,000 hectares or 12,000 acres. In 1804, de Parc, a French naval veteran of the American Revolution, acquired the property and began construction of the manor house, which was completed 11 months later. He placed his manor house squarely in the middle of the large Colapisa Native American village that had been on the site for over a century. The Parc's new farm was located on prime real estate, on unusually high and cleared ground. At the Parc's death in 1808, the plantation consisted of 10 sizable buildings, including quarters for 17 slaves, a barn, warehouses, and a small rudimentary sugar mill. It was renamed the Laura Plantation after the daughter of the new owner. Some 1,000 meters or 600 feet north of the manor house flowed the Mississippi, and a wooden pier allowed docking for boats of all sizes. Along the riverbank ran a levee that protected the plantation from spring flooding. A primitive road followed the levee, and a tall fence separated the plantation from passers-by. Our third and final plantation stop is Oak Alley, by far the most picturesque of the 3 we visited. The first thing you see when you enter the grounds is the lane of mighty oak trees, twice as wide as they are tall. In a double row, the mere 28 trees create an enchanted forest. They were planted in the early 1700s by an unknown French settler who placed the 28 seedlings in 2 evenly spaced rows from his modest house down to the river. The house is a classic antebellum mansion in a white Greek Revival style, complete with a wide veranda. Antebellum means pre-war and refers to houses in the Deep South built prior to the American Civil War. Oak Alley, originally called Bon Séjour, was built as a sugar cane plantation designed by the same architect behind the New Orleans famous French Market. The mansion was built entirely by slave labor over 2 years and was completed in 1837. The architect did not take the temperatures into account when he was designing the house, as it was incredibly warm even in winter, so verandas had to be added for a cooling effect. Even with that, the 3rd floor reached temperatures of 50 degrees or 120 degrees Fahrenheit during summer. Naturally, it could only be used for storage. As opposed to the Laura plantation, business and family life at Oak Alley were kept completely separate. That probably goes a long way to explain why the plantation failed financially. An attempt was made to bring it out of the red after the Civil War. However, without the use of slaves, it was not financially feasible. Heading back the 60 or so kilometers to New Orleans, we have to make a stop at Louis Armstrong Park, a 32-acre area named after the famous jazz singer who was born in New Orleans. In the 1960s, a controversial urban renewal project leveled a substantial portion of land, and after a decade of debate, the city created the present-day park. Some elements of the park's design have been subject to critique throughout the years, and residents of the adjacent neighborhoods have called for the removal of a large fence and converting the concrete parking lots into green space. Unfortunately, the park is often deserted, which makes tourists susceptible to muggings both during the day and at night. When you visit, I'd suggest doing so with a tour guide. Louis Armstrong Park was home to the first New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival in 1970. More recently, the park has been the home of the Jazz in the Park free concert series. Unfortunately, that brings our adventure to an end. Experiencing Mardi Gras was certainly an event to remember, and who thought touring those cemeteries would be so interesting? I was really impressed with the grandeur of the plantations and couldn't get over those massive laneways of live oak trees. New Orleans is a city well worth exploring, and although I've been several times, I certainly plan on returning. For photosNtravel, I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen. It's been my pleasure to be your tour guide today, and I look forward to our next adventure.
Want to know what's happening in Skugog? News and lifestyle, changes in business, and all the entertainment information you'll ever need. Plus, each edition has a new photosNtravel article. Look for your next copy in your mailbox.
At thestandardnewspaper.ca, we try to show you the lighter side of our community workers and shed some light into their work in our community. With human interest stories on how the community gives back and reporting on legislation which affect us all, the Standard News is raising the standard in your community.